Okay, can everyone hear me? Yes, good, excellent. So I'm Amara, and I'm going to do a very quick tour through the database that was developed as part of the Beyond Notability project. So just to give you a brief overview, the project was an AHRC-funded project that ran from October 2021 until the end of last year, so 2024, three-year project. We had a number of goals, one of which was to develop a database, which is what I'm going to talk about today, but also to go through some key record sets in the Society of Antiquaries. So the Society of Antiquaries' own institutional archive, including blue papers, which are the forms for candidates to be proposed as fellows, but also minute books and that kind of thing. The Royal Archaeological Institute's archives, which are also held at the moment at the Society of Antiquaries. And finally, the Congress of Archaeological Societies archive, which is also held at the Society of Antiquaries, which, if none of you has heard of the Congress, it's basically the forerunner of the Council for British Archaeology, but it had a much wider remit. The project time period of the project covers 1870 to about 1950. We go a little bit into the 1950s, but not by much. And it's women in archaeology, history, and heritage. So the women in our database are not just archaeologists, they're also historians and folklorists and anthropologists, and sometimes multiples of those. And we have a big sort of database of people, organizations, events, excavation sites, etc., and over 900 women in the database. So I'm not going to show you all of that today, but I will hopefully introduce you to your own explorations of the stuff that we've pulled together. So there are a few different ways to search the database. This is the first homepage of the database, and you can find it by Googling the project Beyond Notability, and if you add database, it should come up relatively early in the search functions. And this is the search box at the top. You can search by a name, or you can search by a site, and maybe we'll have it and maybe we won't. But if you wanted to do just a basic keyword search, you can do that. You can also access, hopefully this will work, access the database through a number of different options. So we have some visualizations here. So for example, we have a visualization, hopefully this will work. This is a data essay, but it will explain how we've approached education over the course of the database. Just briefly, what we've done is separate people's degrees from where they got educated, because not all the women in our database got degrees, but they did often take classes at a university. So we've chosen to represent that in separate boxes in our database. So you can search people who got degrees, or you can search people who were educated at a place. Anyway, I'll go back. There's a number of different ways you can do this. You can also go by query. So we've assembled a list of queries of different ways to dive into our data, which I'm not going to go through, but you can access the data in that way as well. Over the course of the project, we collaborated with a storyteller called Vanessa Wolf, who created stories about 5 of our women, including Jessie Mothersole and Elizabeth Hodgson, in a double bill story, which is about Hadrian's Wall. So I'd encourage you to listen to that. And thank you very much to Francis, and David for contributing to the creation of this story. It's not a sort of biographical story. It kind of takes you through a sort of narrative. I don't want to give too much of it away, but it's about 15 minutes long, and you can access it through our website. So there is no way to search for Romano-British experts in our database, I'm sorry to say, but you can search, for example, for Roman society, and that will bring up an entry for the Roman society, which is very short. But what the most important part of this is what links here, because that will give you everything, everybody in our database that we have who is linked to the Roman society, which is 27 people. That isn't to say that there were only 27 members of the Roman society who were women. It's just that because we were focusing on some discrete data sets, these are the women in our database who were members of the Roman society. And there are probably more, but we only had 3 years, so we had limited time to do all of the sort of linking together. But I'm just going to go into Nora Jolliffe's entry to explain the kinds of information you can find. Nora Jolliffe, if none of you know her, was educated at Girton, but she also taught at Girton, and she was a member of the Classical Association and also a member of the Roman Society, and I think like on the council of the Roman Society, if I remember correctly. But the kind of thing that we do in the database is to create a series of statements which are biographical in one way or another. And we start out with an image. So the image you can't see here because it's not on Wikimedia Commons, but any images that are on Wikimedia Commons will show up in this box. But because there is an image online, we have the link here. It happens to be connected to a blog that I wrote about Nora Jolliffe some years ago, because her archive or part of her papers are at Girton. And they include a lovely photograph of her British School at Rome ID, which gives you a sense of what she was like in her 20s. All of the addresses that we could find are then listed with the dates that they are associated with. So you can see that we have her listed at Girton. She also was a lecturer at Reading, and that comes up on some of her membership lists as her sort of business address. I came across her initially because I used to work at Reading as the research officer at the Ure Museum, and the museum's archive includes a little bit of information about Nora Jolliffe because she was curator of what was the Romano-British Museum at the University of Reading, which doesn't exist anymore. And you could see her Reading address, some other addresses. These are from Classical Association Journal. And she was a teacher in Sheffield and at Cheltenham Ladies College, which is also her alma mater. So you can see her professional addresses there. She went to Cheltenham Ladies College, Girton, and the British School at Rome, so those are her educated at. You'll notice that we haven't given her a degree, even though she did actually get a diploma, and then eventually a master's degree. But we don't know from where. We have family name at birth because that allows us to easily search our database for who was married and who was not. She was not married, so she only has a family name at birth. Her election to the Royal Archaeological Institute, which is one of the data sets that we looked at, was by Christopher Hawkes in the 1930s. This was just when she had joined the excavations at Colchester, which she was a member of. And so Christopher Hawkes proposes her as a member of the Royal Archaeological Institute after like a season or two at Colchester. You can see all of her memberships that we were able to find. The RAI, Roman Studies, Cambridge Antiquarian Society, Folklore Society. She was also a member of the International Congress of Prehistoric and Protohistoric Sciences. All of these you can click on. They have entries, and then you can see who links to those places. So it's all meant to be linked, if you take my meaning. Classical Association, obviously, which I mentioned before. We've decided to create a category for positions held. This allows us to pull together positions that women were holding, but we don't know if they got paid for them. If they got paid for them, and we know that they got paid, and it was like a steady, long-term job, we have employed as. So you can see over here, she's employed as an academic at Reading, but she also holds a bunch of honorary positions and other things that she didn't necessarily get paid for. She also serves on the council of various organizations, the Hellenic Society Council, Royal Archaeological Institute, Classical Association. That allows us to give a sense of her service. And then this is quite an important category for us, which is spoke at. This allows us to capture women's activities when they're not necessarily publishing their work, but they're presenting about it. So we have a bunch of presentations that she gives. She was a Romano-British religion specialist, so she did actually publish on Brigantia. I can't remember in what journal, but she gives papers about it. She also spoke at the Classical Association a few times, and we have collaborations with, she co-published an article with Eugenie Sellers, so that's referenced there. We have a field for works published in. This happens to be quite sort of academic journals, the Archaeological Journal and the Hellenic Society Journal, but this also allows us to capture other kinds of publications that are more ephemeral, so things like literary magazines will go into this box. And that gives us a much wider sense of where women are publishing, where it doesn't sit within a sort of necessarily a scholarly context, which is quite important for women and also for men, but we're focusing on women in this context. We also have a category for organizer. So this is activities that allows us to capture sort of meeting organization. So she organized quite an important meeting of the Classical Association at Reading in April 1932, which kind of pops up on various notifications about her professional activities. So it was clearly quite an important thing for her to be organizing. And where we know that women are directing archaeological fieldwork, we have a category for that. So she directed an excavation at Whittam, and that also has its own entry. And you can see the other people who were part of this excavation. So it was a co-directed excavation with Thalassa Crusoe, who is also a fellow of the Society of Antiquaries. Nora Jolliffe was never a fellow of the Society of Antiquaries. And Frank Cottrell is another person who was directing as well. And this member of excavation allows us to pull together larger teams of people. Sometimes we don't have everyone's name, but we'll have an indication of groups of people. So in this case, it's a group of undergraduates from New College, Oxford, who is part of the excavation team, but we don't have individual entries for all of those people. We try and link it to an actual site. So in this case, we've been able to do that. And then we also have an indication of who organizes the dig. So in this case, it was a joint Society of Antiquaries, Essex Archaeological Society affair. Colchester Excavations, I've already mentioned. She was a member of a very large team at Colchester, excavating in the early 1930s. A number of other people who excavated at Colchester also went on to excavate at Bury Hill, Buckland Rings. And so you get a sense of a network of women and men who are kind of moving around the same excavations. Then we have more biographical information with dates of birth, dates of death, where papers might be located, and then some IDs that link you to wider databases. We have not necessarily an equal number of entries for every single woman. Partly that's down to us not always being able to identify people's first names. So if someone has a very common last name and no first name, and that's the only reference you have, we give them an entry with the thing that we've found them associated with, but we're unable to connect them more than that. But they are on the database. Nora Jolliffe happens to be on Wikidata, so we've connected it into Wikidata. She also has various other IDs. These two at the bottom, we had a trial where we attempted to map people's sort of social and economic backgrounds. So her dad was a college tutor, so there's a wider database that allows you to code people's occupations. And so this just gives you a sense of the kind of background that she's coming from. And there's another similar thing that sort of groups professions together into larger categories. So college tutor is a professional class job. That's where that comes from. That's probably about as much time as we have. I'm very happy to answer any questions about the database, but do have a search and see what you can find. I should say a big caveat, like I said in the beginning, is we're only focusing on very specific records. So while we have 900 plus women in the database, if you don't find the person you're looking for, we only had 3 years of funding. So if we had another 10 years, we could probably cover everybody to a more minute degree. But that's time-limited funding projects for you. So thank you very much.